Greetings all, hope you're doing well out there. Welcome to another session of Not the Norm. And as usual, I always start out with the old caveat emptor, which is a Latin expression which means let the buyer beware. It's the doctrine of caveat emptor means that in a sale of goods the seller is under no duty to reveal unflattering truths about the goods. A buyer must buy the goods after satisfying himself of their quality and fitness. So buyer beware. It's always up to you. Don't believe what you're being told. And our old friend Buddha had something to say about that. He said, believe nothing, no matter where you read it or who has said it, not even if I have said it, unless it agrees with your own reason and your own common sense. Well, I think he knew a thing or two. Okay, so I thought I might introduce you to the idea that we are actually surrounded by symbols. I thought we might just cover the old some of the symbols that we are surrounded by, because that's in the end very symbolic. Excuse the pun. So what is a symbol? A symbol is a mark or sign or word that indicates, signifies, or is understood as representing an idea, object, or relationship. Symbols allow people to go beyond what is known or seen by creating linkages between otherwise very different concepts and experiences. All communication is achieved through the use of symbols. Symbols take the form of words, sounds, gestures, ideas, or visual images and are used to convey other ideas and beliefs. For example, a red octagon is a common symbol for the stop sign in many countries. And of course on maps, as a universal sign in cartography, we have blue lines representing rivers. And another universal symbol that's known pretty much globally is of course the red rose, representing love and compassion, which is also expressed in the symbol of the human heart, of course. Now another group of symbols which are extremely important are numerals, which of course are symbols for numbers. And when we understand that everything's a numbers game, we start to comprehend just how essential they are in our lives. Now another group of symbols, of course, that are extremely essential in our lives to do with our writing is our alphabet, represented by the symbols that we call letters. And the letters we have today have been developed over thousands of years, come down from the Etruscans, Egyptians, Phoenicians, and interestingly that's where we get our phonetics from too, is the Phoenicians. Of course they were sea merchants, traders of the sea, and to represent and to be able to communicate who they are and what they're up to and to be able to trade, they needed a language that they could all agree upon and understand. And those languages and those trading individuals and companies and ships and that have developed over, as I say, thousands of years. And of course we get what we have today in the forms of all the logos and representations through many different styles, fonts, colours, and applications of all those things together, creating their logos and symbols that represent the companies that we know today. And just to illustrate further some of the examples of places where we find all sorts of symbols, of course you've got gang signs, and all through law enforcement and your different agencies of military and whatnot, they have all sorts of symbols that recognise rank. You have scars, marks, and tattoos, and also the biometric community, the linguistics community with regards to semiotics, which is in fact the study of symbology, and it's represented again in all sorts of iconography. You've got religious symbology, you've got symbolic anthropology, and last but not least there, of course, you've got code. Now I would submit the idea, or posit the idea I should say, that pretty much everything is code, and depending on one's ability and comprehension of the symbols that you're observing, of course determines the level of communication that you receive from those symbols. And the more we delve into it, the more we realise how deep the rabbit hole goes with regards to symbols. Sigmund Freud told us about symbols that, after all, we did not invent symbolism. It is an universal, age-old activity of the human imagination. Another very important symbol, of course, is the peace sign. And that was originally designed by a chap called Gerald Holtham for the British campaign for nuclear disarmament back in 1958. It's often been maligned as an anti-Christian symbol, an upside-down broken cross in the form of a Nero cross, sometimes depicted as a satanic character or even a Nazi emblem. But in actual fact, the vertical line in the centre represents the flag semaphore signal for the letter D, and the downward lines on either side represent the semaphore signal for the letter N. And the N and D together, of course, was for a nuclear disarmament. And so that's where the actual symbol came from, or the meaning of it. And of course we have the universally known hand sign or victory sign, is a hand gesture in which the index and middle fingers are raised and parted while the other fingers are clenched. It has various meanings depending on the cultural context and how it is represented, or how it is presented, I should say. It is most commonly used to represent the letter V, as in victory, as a symbol of peace, usually with a palm outward. And as an offensive gesture, which is the palm inward. Comes from the old days. I think it was the French and the English fighting each other. They used to taunt each other by flicking their two fingers in the air, which meant that they still had them, was signifying that they still had them. Because if they ever got caught by the enemy would chop their fingers off so they couldn't use their bows and arrows again. And of course we have another universally known hand gesture here that most of us understand the meanings of it. And there's also other parts of our anatomy that are identified through certain symbols. And most of us are fairly familiar with the symbols representing male and female. What we might not be so familiar with is the fact that these symbols also, depending on their context, can represent other things. For example, if we're looking at the periodic table, we have the symbol for man being iron and the symbol for woman being copper. And if we go to the astrological signs and symbols, we have the male symbol representing Mars and the female symbol representing Venus. And of course another symbol we have here is the caduceus symbol, probably one of the world's most easily recognised and popular symbols, a symbol of the medical profession, and is often used to represent doctors, hospitals and pharmacies. But of course it has its roots in ancient Greece. According to the Greek mythology, it was the staff of Hermes, the god of commerce and travel, and the staff was supposedly had magical powers and could be used to heal injuries and disease. But in actual fact, there may actually be evidence that points to it going back a lot further and having a lot more other deeper levels of symbology. Symbology that may actually be quite sinister in nature and give us cause for concern. Another symbol that gives us cause for concern, of course, is the old skull and crossbones, which is often a danger warning sign for poison and is also commonly known on the pirates' flag of piracy. And piracy being rape, pillage and plunder should give any good man cause for concern. And most of you will recognise this next particular symbol. It of course is the Ouroboros, the snake eating its tail, or sometimes depicted as the dragon eating its tail, and sometimes depicted laying on its side as well, which gives us the mathematical infinity figure, but it is in fact called the lemniscate, a very ancient symbol, and gives us the symbology of the sine wave there. And that of course gives us this next symbol that you'll all be very familiar with, the yin and yang. This of course being a very ancient Chinese symbol, with the yin being the black representing female and the yang being white representing male. Of course, it means all sorts of other things as well, but mainly harmony and balance, and good within bad and bad within good. Now, probably the most ancient symbol in history, or the one that most people are very familiar with, of course, is the swastika. That also originally meant harmony and balance as well at one stage, and in fact was a good luck charm until, of course, it got politicised over the last 100 years, and now is kind of denigrated as a negative symbol. Okay, moving right along here, we've covered lots of symbols that many of us are familiar with, and symbols that have, as I say, evolved over history and over time and through the ages, always evolving and having different meanings and different interpretations. So I'd like to move on now to maybe some symbols that aren't so familiar, and I'll start off with a quote here from Manly P. Hall. Symbolism is the language of the mysteries. By symbols men have ever sought to communicate to each other those thoughts which transcend the limitations of language. So he's clearly telling us there that there's deeper levels of communication being conveyed within the symbols once you understand how to decipher them. Now, also, he was a 33rd degree Mason in the Scottish Rite Masons Lodge, and of course, once you understand their symbology, you start to see that saturating our society and permeating these many of the companies that we are very aware of, and not only that, many of the things that we use on a day-to-day basis are also covered in the symbology. I'm not going to go too much into the Masonic lodges or anything like that in this particular video, as I've covered that in previous videos which you can find on my YouTube channel. But suffice to say that the symbols are everywhere once you start to see them. And in all honesty, one would pretty much have to be completely blind to not be able to see them. But then you have to recognize them first. So hopefully this video has given you a little bit of insight into some of the symbolism that is around us, and in actual fact the symbology is everywhere once we comprehend it. So I hope you like that. Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe and share, and we'll catch you on the next one.